So Kevin and I are going to play off each other a little bit, but I think we should start with what's the difference between B2B sales than B2C sales?
Kevin, you're muted.
There we go. We're good.
There you go.
Oh yeah, now we're hot.
Awesome.
It's my first webinar, guys. I'm sorry.
Not true.
So I think there's a lot of differences between B2B and B2C. But what I think everyone also needs to keep in mind as we talk through this is at the end of the day, it's always B2P, right? Like you're selling to people. No matter how you do this, there's normally a person at the other end that's buying. And so when I think B2B, there tends to be more decision makers involved, right? Like multiple people have to agree, multiple people have to sign off on it. Also with B2B versus B2C, things tend to take a little bit longer as well. There's more nuances, more legalities, more steps, bigger contracts, things like that, where B2C, or actually the industry I'm in right now, is like B to sole proprietor. So technically my company sells to businesses, but it's business owners, right? So it's 1 to 2 people that we need to convince to do it. So I think those are some of the biggest differences I see between the two. I'd be curious to kind of get your take on it.
Yeah, I mean, when I talk to founders, they often have gotten into, they say, oh, I don't know anything about sales. And maybe a lot of you can relate to this, like feeling sales is really foreign because you're a product manager who has started a company, or maybe you're a marketer who started a company or came from another background. And when I hear that, I think, well, you started the company for a reason and you did a bunch of customer development to know the product that you're building is right for a particular industry. User interviews tend to come more naturally to people who are running startups. And so if you take that user interview and you instead think about it as a buyer interview, and instead of just saying, hey, as a user, do you think this button should be green or blue? But instead you ask the question, okay, if the button is green, does that change how you're going to get this purchase for your company or for yourself? And so just think about it as a user interview and think, okay, the person that I'm serving, are they also the person who's buying? And so if I'm, like one of the companies that I'm a big fan of there in Mexico City is Raw Apothecary, and they sell beauty supplies and, natural healthcare items to mostly women, but some men, but they're selling direct as an e-commerce play. And so the question on, hey, how would you buy this is going to be very different from somebody who's deciding what to put in their own medicine chest at home for their nighttime skin routine than if you are selling a kit to like one of the physicians that Kevin works with, right? So if you sell a doctor, like, hey, here are these 5 things that you need for your practice, right? That decision is going to be made very different than if you were to scale up and say, hey, I want to sell into a 7-Eleven chain to put these products or whatever the kind of the quick service pharmacy, like a Rite Aid or Walgreens in the States, and I'm going to sell into them. Now we've got a buyer who has to talk to a whole committee worth of people inside that pharmacy to decide whether or not your products go in. And I think that's a kind of a way to think about, like, who is your perceived user? Are they the person that's actually going to give you money for this? And then start to design a process around that, right? So I agree with you, Kevin, B2P, these are all people, but if inside a company, people have bosses and everybody reports to somebody. In a household, you sell a couch. I don't make the decisions on couches alone. My wife and I talk about that. We ask the kids what they're not going to jump on, usually a lie. But then at work, you say, hey, I want to sell you this piece of marketing software. I'm going to bring 3 or 4 other people into that conversation.
And one thing I think you said well there, and it's a good segue into how to prospect, is when you sell B2B, there tends to be a user, someone who actually uses your product. There's someone who's impacted by your product. So they don't even use it, but they're impacted by it. And then you have a buyer. B2C, the user, the impacted, and the buyer tends to be the same person, right? Ryan said he's going to buy a mattress. He's buying the mattress. He's impacted by the mattress. He's going to use the mattress. If I'm buying a piece of software, like I run a large sales team, I may not even use the software that I'm buying. My team uses the software. The impact comes from the results, and I happen to be the buyer of it. So this is where, as you start to prospect, which I think is the first bullet point here on how to do B2B prospecting, It's knowing the differences between the users of your product, the people that are impacted by your product, and who the actual buyer of your product is. Because oftentimes when people are prospecting, they only try to go after the buyer, right? We've always been taught to go top down, right? Go after the CEO or go after the VP. But if I don't actually use your product, it can be very challenging to get my attention. Whereas if you started with the user and get in there and find out what the problems, and this is going to be my biggest tip here on prospecting, if you can find out the problems of the business, that's what makes prospecting so much more powerful. If you can find out from the users where the problems are, that's the information you bring to the top to try to set more appointments.
So somebody online is thinking right now, how do I find the problems inside the companies that I want to buy from me? And I want to offer an idea on that. So Kevin mentioned that he's running a big sales team. He's responsible for all the sales software, and probably some of the marketing software touches that world. A very common sales application is Salesforce as the main CRM. Sometimes, startups coming up will use a tool like HubSpot. I've seen, startups at 500 LATAM use both. Let me give you a quick example. If I talk to somebody with a 10-person sales team and they're using HubSpot as the marketing tool and the sales tool, and they've got 10 people on the team, I know they probably spent somewhere between $3,000 and $5,000 on that software suite. I talk to the same group of people, but they say, I'm using Salesforce. I'm using email send tool like SalesLoft. I know Kevin's a fan of the SalesLoft guys. Outreach.io is another example. So I've got to have an enterprise Salesforce, and it's got to connect to this sales software. And then I use maybe Marketo to send email for the marketing team. Well, that group of 10 people figured out how to spend about $100,000 on software for their sales team, whereas team number one is probably spending 3 or 5. And so if you're thinking whatever market you're serving, whether it's a market full of doctors or lawyers or solopreneurs, or you're selling into big companies like GE or Verizon or whatever, find out the other software that's in for that buyer and user, right? So think about your buyer and user that go together like Kevin just described. And then think about what are the other tools they use? How much did it cost? How did they buy it? And instead of showing up and saying, hey, I've got a new widget, will you buy this from me in your user interview? Say, what are the other tools that your team needs you to support? And they'll say, oh, well, for IT, we use this tool. For provisioning, we use this tool. For marketing, we use this tool. Ask how that was bought. How'd you buy Salesforce? How did you buy the software that you manage your warehouse management suite? How'd you buy that? What tool is it? Who signed off on it? How much was it? How long did it take to implement? These are all questions you can ask that are going to start to reveal this pain piece that Kevin just talked about, knowing what pain exists for the user and the buyer and the other people that are around that decision process.
Because oftentimes I've sat through them. You guys will do your user interviews, right? Or you're doing your surveying, and you're trying to run the product by your industry. But a lot of the questions will focus on the product. What do you want it to do? How does it do this? Do you like this? Do you like that? But there's not enough questions asked on the problems the product will solve, right? And so what I do when I go into a new industry, and this is something I'm very proud of, like I've crossed 4 different industries now as a sales leader and have found success, right? It's not just selling one thing through it. What I do is I go in and I talk to at least 30 customers, and I ask them these questions. Why did you buy? How would you describe what the product does? What problems were you hoping to solve with this product? What were you afraid of before buying this product? How did you decide to buy? And what's changed the most since you've bought? If you get those 6 questions answered by 20, 30, 40 customers, now when we talk about cold calling scripting and we talk about emailing and we talk about social selling, now you can actually use the language of the customer. There's also too, you guys built the product, so you get it. You know the inner workings. You understand everything. Your prospect might not. You have to use the prospect's language when you're prospecting. People forget that. A lot of early founders and salespeople across the country and the world, it's not prospecting, it's like productation. It's all about the product. It's nothing about the prospect. So you got to use their language when you're prospecting.
I like that. Hey, Katie, will you talk a little bit about the difference between what a founder should do when they're selling their like first stranger with a product? Maybe they're under 10K of revenue, and somebody who might join like your company where they're joining a 100-person plus sales team, and maybe they're a sales development person or an AE who comes and joins a team later. How should those two personas think differently about prospecting?
For sure. So honestly, I think the thing that pops into my head first is, as the founder, you have to understand no one else is going to be able to sell like you. You're the founder. Not only do you know the product better, but you probably know the industry better. You have the title and you have a confidence about you as the founder because you know it inside and out. So
industry expert.
Like you are an industry expert, right? And so what you, as a founder for selling, what you have to remember is you actually have to slow down a little bit, because you might know so much about the product that when you're selling early on, like you're just this, and people are like, whoa, like I just heard of you guys, right? So when a founder is selling, generally speaking, you need to slow down a little bit and only focus on, and this will be the hard thing, only focus on the parts of your product that the prospect cares about. You're going to want to tell it everything because you know everything it can do. Slow down, do proper discovery so that you're only talking about the things that your prospect needs to hear. Or on the flip side, the SDR, your goal is to become an industry expert. It's to shadow your CEO and listen to what they say. It's reading all the relevant blog articles and forums and books on your industry. It's connecting with the thought leaders in the industry you're selling to so you can become an industry expert. Because that's something where a lot of salespeople don't know what it's like to be prospected. I get prospected all the time, and I can tell when that salesperson has no idea what a VP of sales does. No idea. They use messaging that doesn't make any sense. So to wrap on that, founders, slow down, and you don't have to sell your whole product. You really don't. New sales rep, you need to learn the product very well, but more importantly, you need to learn the industry because that's going to make you more confident.
Mm-hmm. I want to. We had a question in this chat that I want to call out a little bit. When you think about this kind of pain point and you think about getting to the person who has that pain, you might be in a situation where you're selling to somebody or prospecting them and you use their language, you understand what their life is like. Let's say, you're selling a tool like Jimmy asked about online fashion education, right? And so the buyer is somebody who's either attending the class or they're attending the class and the parent pays for it. Now, on the B2P sales model that Kevin's talking about, if you think about this as just all people, you've got somebody who needs the product and somebody else who signs off on it, like having a parent pay for a class, the same way that if I want to buy a sales tool, I might have to go to a VP of sales like Kevin's role and say, hey, boss, I like this. It's $3 a month. Can I use the company credit card to try it out? If I like it, can I buy it for the team? Now think about the person who's prospecting in both of those situations. They need to understand that role well enough. And the school model is interesting because most of us have been through a school experience. And so if you think about like a school experience, like Jimmy asked about, if we know, okay, as a student, I potentially have a parent who might be paying for this. Well, your first question is going to be, are you paying for this yourself or is a parent paying for this? Do you have college savings or are you taking out a loan? All of those are going to change the conversation. Now, they might be super direct things to ask in your first 10 minutes of talking to somebody. So maybe you ask other questions. What other classes have you taken? Why did you take that class? Oh, my dad recommended me try this thing. Okay, now I know that your dad's involved in your decision-making process. In the startup world, right? Maybe you've got a company of 10 people. The designer buys a product like Envision. I'm very supportive of Envision. They're an early client of mine. So your designer buys this thing and they go to the CEO and say, hey, I think everybody should have a login. All right. If I understand that person's pain, I can talk to them a little bit about how they're going to share it internally. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I think
Guys,
sorry
to interrupt. it's time to go to the next topic, and probably by the end we can go back to keep going deeper in this one.
We need 90 seconds more. We got to talk about tools. The question of tools came up.
90 more seconds, and we're jumping back to topic number 2.
Kevin, 3 prospecting tools that are not your CRM.
Yes. So you need a data tool. You need a data tool that can help you get contact information for your prospects. So a Zoom info, a Rocket Reach, a salesintel.io. First, you need contact info. Seamless.ai is another good one, because if you can't get in touch with them, it doesn't matter. The next thing is you need a sales engagement tool. So something that's going to map out your sales process. So a Sales Loft, an Outreach, an Apollo, Mixmax is a low-cost option for a lot of startup founders, but where you can build out when you call, when you email, when you touch, and that's all mapped out for you. And then if you're growing, you need a coaching software, something that you can listen in on how the calls are going and give feedback on yourself or on your reps to improve.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
What's a good recommendation around coaching software?
Sorry, Gong is a great one. Right. Exec Vision is a great one, and Chorus. Those are the big 3 in the game right now. But actually, on that, Sales Loft and Outreach are both also starting to offer some of the coaching tools in their program as well.
Awesome.
So I would just say that, step 1 is understand what your process is. And process was kind of asked in this question, but you have already, as a product-driven founder, you've already drawn out what you think the user is going to do with your product. Now go draw out what you think the sales process should be of somebody bringing this product in. And when you find out that step 3 is a meeting where there's 10 people that need a demo, well, then we need to talk about a demo tool. Maybe you're on Zoom, maybe you're recording a video. So build pick and choose the tools, because you can't pay for all the ones that Kevin just listed, but pick and choose the tools based on what process is needed, because you understand your buyer's pain and you understand that buying process of how they're going to take it and get their boss to give you budget.
Awesome. Ready to go for the next topic?
Yeah.
Awesome. Danny, can you change the slide, please? Okay, so next topic is going to be around acquisition and retention. And there's a couple of subtopics about that. Let's jump to the next slide, Danny. And there you go. Which are the best channels, generally speaking, to get leads? How to get users on Salesforce in a marketplace? Which are the best user retention strategies to increase the marketplace lifetime value? And how to win rich users? Let's go deep on those topics, guys.
So I'll jump on that first bullet point in terms of the best channels generally to get leads that I think gets often overlooked is your customers. Customer referrals are just dramatically underutilized across almost all industries and all startups. Ryan probably knows the stat exactly, but I think it's like 68% of customers are willing to give a referral, but only like 22% of companies regularly ask for referrals. Referrals will be your lowest cost of acquisition. They will be your highest closed rate, and they tend to have a really good ACV as well. So I'd say first, if you have customers, start with your customers. Ask them to introduce you to other people like them is one of the first places you can get leads. So I'll start with that one and pass to Ryan. There's a few other ways, but that's one I wanted to throw out there right away.
Yeah. Well, that takes me on a little bit of detour, because I just want to call out that in the sales process, a lot of people think, oh, I don't want to do sales, or I don't want to be sold to. Obviously we're very biased in that we've had great careers in sales, and we've seen it be the catalyst of organizations taking off. And so when you can get over that and go, okay, this is just people talking to other people, something that's going to happen is one of your clients is going to ask you for something. And they're going to say, oh, I would like to be able to have an admin login to this tool because I got 5 people on my team using it. And you haven't built admin yet, so you start to build that out. That is a perfect time to say, look, since you're doing this for 5 people on your team, I'm happy to build this tool for you. Will you do an interview with me that I can post on the website about how are you using this across your whole team? That's question 1. Write that down. Will you do an interview or share your logo or do a case study? Question 2 is, can you think of 2 or 3 other peers in the industry who also need to use something like this on their team? Maybe they're people you went to school with. Maybe there are people that you know in your industry. Maybe there are people you go to a conference with, right? That's the way to ask for that intro, right? And then the third part is like, hey, if I've got a reference or I've got the ability to do the intro, you can also ask the reverse question, which is, can you think of any reason why you wouldn't be sharing about this on social media? No, I can't think of any reason why not, other than I maybe don't do LinkedIn as often as other people, but I'm happy to do a referral or a reference or do a short write-up on how I've been using the tool. Customers love the ability to show off that they are forward thinking. Part of their forward thinking is the fact that they bought your software, right? So don't be afraid to ask those things, because you do have good tension in a relationship. There's a lot of give and take. There are a lot of things to ask for. Let's talk about getting users in like a Salesforce marketplace. I think this is a great question. I'm certainly not an expert. I've worked at a couple companies that had a marketplace-like strategy. And I think a big piece of it is making sure people know that's your distribution model. You know, if you think about like nonprofits, I started my career in nonprofit management. People give to charities because they're asked. The number one charity, most of the world, is churches. Why do people give to their church? Because somebody asks them every week. They pass the plate around, or whatever the habit is in your culture or religion, right? If the plate is passed around, or the reverend asks for donations, or whatever is going on. Because you're asked, then you do it. You've got to also ask for the order. And so if you say, hey, my distribution strategy is on the Salesforce marketplace, let's go learn everybody else who's in that marketplace, why they're there. What are the other tools they're buying? Maybe we do an ad campaign with a partner that says, when you're in that marketplace and also buying a tool for your CRM, also consider buying our product, right? Maybe we're partnered with somebody, that sort of thing, right? So making sure that you tell your customer how to find you is essential. Make it easy for them.
And he just touched on it there. I think like BD or channel sales often early on is also not looked at strongly enough. If you go into that marketplace, who in there does your product complement? Who in that marketplace does your product complement or support or amplify? That's a potential partner. That's someone you can reach out to and say, hey, our product will help your customers get better results with your product. It becomes a very symbiotic relationship where now they are encouraged as well to support promoting you in that marketplace. It becomes another channel. So if you're in a big marketplace, who do you complement? Who does your product amplify? Where are their synergies? And then team up in that marketplace. Now you start to become a bigger fish in that pond than just being the one thing in there that does what you do.
Hey, Kevin, so Manuel Friends asked, what are your recommendations in maintaining already existing B2B alliances or sales channel partners? Can you talk a little bit about how to maintain that relationship once the channel partner has been set?
Yes. So it's actually funny. I just celebrated my 8-year wedding anniversary with my wife yesterday. And
congrats.
Thank you very much.
Her video of you on LinkedIn is awesome. So if you guys are not following KD on LinkedIn, you need to go follow him. If nothing else, to see him do this, like, what were you doing? Were you like, was it a dance off? Or were you just singing with the girls or what?
Yeah. So yes, my wife caught a very candid video of me dancing with my daughters, and basically using my youngest daughter as like a mannequin and like making her do all the moves. And we had it in front of the TV so she could see herself, right? Like a mirror. So just, it's I didn't know she was recording. I definitely didn't know she was going to post it on LinkedIn. But anyway, you don't have to go watch that, guys. Yeah, she got me.
It's too late. But they're already going. They're searching for it right now.
I know, right? But to bring it back, channel relationship, customer relationship, marriage relationship, I think the biggest thing is one, being proactive, like proactively staying in touch, proactively thanking them for what they do, right? But also like doing things to benefit them, right? So often a channel partnership is formed, and I have channel partners, and they're going, hey, like, what are you doing for us right now? And I say, what are you doing for me right now? Right? So it's proactively, how can you support them? What are their goals? And make sure you're proactively doing things to help them achieve what they want. That's one of the biggest ways. The other one is just communication. Stay in touch. Yeah. I have channel partners and like customer success people that I haven't heard from in a year. They have not reached out to me in a year, even just to say how you doing, right?
Yeah.
So reach out, stay in touch. That's a huge thing that most companies don't do.
Guys,
So-
I want to jump in because I think retention is a topic that is very, very interesting, and somehow acquisition could be the whole 15 minutes, and retention another 15. But for me,
Yeah.
retention is something important because I've seen so many founders reporting retention in a very weird way. Sometimes the retention for them will be just the second purchase, but I think, in my perspective, retention will be defined very differently within your business.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you define retention for each business? What's good retention, and how can you measure retention the right way?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people measuring it a different way. When I was at an ad agency, I was looking at David Andres' question that around like advertising companies, and I was at a company called AdRoll very early on when we had less than $1 million of revenue, and I got to see the basically $0 to a $300 million run on an ad tech product. And our competitor was measuring retention by anybody who had logged into their campaign in 1 year. We were measuring retention based on whether or not you logged in that month. Everybody has their own method. I'm not saying that one was right and one was wrong, but I think ours really helped us basically keep the team focused on the right incentive, which is we want people to come back to their dashboard to see constant value. It's not a vanity metric on like how many people are logging in. It's about constant value. And so one really quick way that you as a founder can think about retaining the client, earlier we were talking about retaining partners, but you can do this with partners too. But retaining the client is do a quarterly business review. It sounds very official. And when you say, hey, I'd like to schedule our quarterly business review, it sounds like something I'm supposed to do as a customer. Okay, you're going to do a review. The same way that at my school, my kids' school, they say, hey, it's time for parent-teacher conferences. I can't get out of that. I have to do that. It's going on the calendar, right? Like my wife's checking with me on the date, and it's going to happen somewhere in the next 10 days because this is the time we do it, right? There's stuff like that in our life that we just don't get around. When you say, it's time for the quarterly business review, I'm coming to you as a client, as a customer, and I'm saying, where are we falling down? What's the biggest opportunity in this account? What are the things you need from me? And that's also a time that I say, here are the things that I need from you. If I'm going to build these extra tools for you, I need you to do a reference. If I'm going to build these extra tools for you, I need you to bring the rest of your team on the platform and buy more licenses. I need you to cross a threshold or minimum. And when you do meetings like that, it just gets more and more sticky. Right. So I don't have a great answer as like how to measure that. But I think that if you start thinking with a real customer mindset and you think about what does this customer want, they don't just want to buy from you and have you go away. They want to build with you. You're probably selling to other startups at some point too. They want to grow with you and build on your platform and vice versa. Those are all things to think about. And quarterly business review can be one thing to trigger that conversation, as well as maybe a 90-day review after they buy the product. That's another way to kind of protect against someone starting and then just turning it off.
So I think to add on to that, he kind of mentioned it. I think something that more companies should measure is product utilization.
Yes.
Right? Like the way he said it's perfect. One company was saying, did they log in a year? His company was like, did they log in the last 30 days? That's why his company won. They were focused on making sure that their customers were utilizing the product more regularly. But then this is the other one, is before you build something new, are they using everything else in that product? The more parts of your product that you can get them to use, the stickier it becomes. Because now I'm utilizing all of it. Most products, and I can say this even as a buyer, right? I can talk as a buyer. I can't say that there's a single product that I have that I fully utilize, that I use every single feature of it. It doesn't happen. But if the customer success was focused on that, they would. But then here's the other thing a lot of companies don't measure when it comes to their customers. Are they achieving the thing that they wanted to achieve when they bought? Right? So I buy a sales loft. Why do I buy a sales loft? Because I want to set more meetings and close more deals. Guess what I haven't been asked by Sales Loft?
Are you closing more deals?
Hey, this is where you were when you started. Where are you now? And then this is the last side of it. Do something about it. Your CS team should be results oriented. Are your customers getting the results we want them to get? Right? So like, okay, they're logging into AdRoll. Are their ads working? Are they actually getting anything out of those ads? That's the last measurement, is are they getting the results they signed up for? Because if they are, they stay. If they don't, they won't.
I think that you're highlighting something that I want to call out, which is sometimes we can get scared of having tough conversations.
Mm-hmm.
But think about this even in your personal life. Every time you've asked a scary question, like, Kevin's anniversary, right? Like, will you marry me? That's a scary question, even if you think you know the answer. I've been through it. The scarier question for me was calling to get Dad's permission. But
right.
but it's a thing. You ask a hard question and you can win a tremendous relationship. And Renee, we should talk about your situation too at some point, since we're both married. But anyway, just messing with you. So here's the question. You got an opportunity to ask a really hard question to somebody who's buying from you. What value are you looking for? Are you getting the value that you wanted? What has been the result since you bought this 30 days ago? Asking that question might lead someone to say, I'm not getting the value. So the question I have for the founders is, do you want to know the answer to that at 30 days or next year when they don't turn on for that renewal, right as you're trying to raise a Series A or Series C?
So good.
I think most people would say, I want to know that sooner. The sales rep's the same thing. It's a scary question as a sales rep to say, hey, are you happy with this? Or did you even like the demo? So anyway, that's a quick thought. Hard questions bring big rewards.
Well, we have 1 minute left for this topic, and I think this one is a good question. Which are the best user retention strategies to increase lifetime value? And I will add something else. Who's responsible for this?
Ooh.
All right. So we can build off what we just said, right? Is know their goals, check in. But then this is the other thing that I think a lot of times goes wrong with some of the customer interviews is you build what they want, not what they need.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're like, hey, I want this. And you go, okay. But if it's not going to be tied to an additional result, right? Like is something going to get better in their world with the product? It's not something that they're going to be willing to pay for. So for LTV, you want to try to build things that amplifies the results that the product was getting, because then it's something they're willing to pay for. If it's just something that just makes it a little bit better or a little bit different, now you're just building products for free. So I think, truthfully, I guess who's responsible for it? I can't code. So y'all got to do that. So that you are responsible for building it. But deciding what to be built, that should be a conversation across CS, sales, and product. I think that's really important, because otherwise you just build a bunch of feature sets and it's like, well, why hasn't revenue gone up? Well, because they weren't willing to pay for them. Well, then you didn't build the right things.
I'd say the number one way to increase revenue inside an account is just asking for more revenue. Renee, you asked the question, like, whose responsibility is that? A customer success filter would say, I want to make sure the customer is happy and I want to make sure the product is well utilized. The sales bias is, I want to make sure we're getting as much value as quick as we can. Marry those two, and then it can be your decision on who's responsible for increasing value in an account. I would say that in the early days, most sales teams I've seen at startups that are just starting out, it's still the same person. There's a salesperson who's going to stay in touch and grow that account. That's a land and expand model. A lot of us tell our VCs, oh, we've got a land and expand model. We're going to sell for 10K and then grow those relationships to 100 or 1K and grow to 10K. If that's the strategy, then you need to map out the process to ask for more money. I'm going to sell to 2 users, and then I'm going to go ask for the other 20. When I was advising a division early on, this is about 9 years ago, we had a solution where if they shared the design with more than 5 people, the team would get notified to call them and say, hey, I see you're sharing your designs a lot. Can we talk to you about that next package up? You would talk to a designer about the next package. They might not be the buyer for anything that's more than 5 seats in their design group. Okay, if that's the case, then you're also asking for an intro to their boss who runs 10 design teams. This exists for almost every one of the B2B companies I've talked to. And so being diligent and mapping out like, okay, I sold today, but this is the date that I'm going to ask for more money. This is the date I'm going to ask for the renewal. At 60 days in, I'm going to say, is there any reason why you're not going to renew after the 90-day pilot?
10-second tip, real super fast, I promise. Build price increases into your contracts. This is something that gets missed very often. With your first contract should have a guaranteed 3% price increase 12 months later.
I'd be so scared to do that if I was a founder, because I just want somebody to say yes. It's scary.
It's scary, but it's 3%. It's 2%. Build it in, because if that person does stay with you for 2 years, 3 years, 3 years later, you've already done a 10% increase on your price without ever having to ask for it again. So just to and also too, that can be a negotiation tip. You take it away. Say, fine, I'll take it out, but you're going to have to do this for me. But build it in early on.
Yeah.
Cool.
So you're talking about I'll take that out if you buy 5 seats instead of 3.
Or do the referral, or do the video, or do the testimonial. You get something for it.
Right on. Right on.
Awesome. Guys, let's jump into the third topic, and that's sales processes. Let's go to that. Danny, probably you can change the slide now. So, Ryan, Kevin, how do you design and create a good sales process?
I think it's got to go around your buyer. What's your buyer doing today? What else are they buying? Why are they buying it? What else are their pain points? Why is it causing them pain? And as you know your buyer, you start to ask them questions. So and even when I talk to people who are in industries, they decide to start a startup and they go to an industry they don't know anything about. They say, yeah, but I've got a cousin who works in this industry. Go sit down and say, what was the last new tool they bought at your company? Why? Who bought it? Who told you about it? Show me the email from HR when they rolled it out to everybody and they said, you've got to log into a new management system or whatever it is. Right? Ask these questions and then you'll start to understand how things were bought. A lot of us are scared to ask, oh, how'd you acquire that tool? But if you think about it, if you ask somebody how they acquired it versus will you look at my tool, you say, how'd you acquire this other tool that's similar? That when they're asked, they'll tell you. So I think that can be a great strategy just to start with. What are you guys currently doing? What's natural to you?
So I think that's a good way to define how they buy. If you're talking about how to then build the sales process of when to call, when to reach out, I'll keep this one short. There's a set of books called the SaaS Sales Method. I would recommend everybody go buy those books if you're looking for a way to build a sales process if you've never done it before. Actually, okay, hold on. Okay, I don't know if everyone can see this, but it's paint by numbers. I don't know if people can see this in here, but it shows you how to build a process out, right? How to go through that. I'd strongly recommend scooping up resources that map it for you so then you can adapt it to your buyer. But if you've never built a sales process before, I understand how intimidating that can be.
Katie, is that Jocko?
Yes.
Okay, so I would say to build on that piece, right? So go out and buy this book if you can. If that's prohibited or you don't have delivery right now, just go and look for Winning by Design's YouTube channel and watch a few videos, because Jocko came actually in one of the batches for 500's office in San Francisco. He came and he talked through drawing out sales process. He did it once, and one of his partners did another one. I'm sure that's on either the 500 YouTube or Winning by Design's YouTube. Start there if you can't get the book tomorrow. If you can get the book tomorrow, great, you should, right? It's great. It's a great way to think very process and very design focus on your customer. I think that's essential when you start to, build this process, build it around your customer. The other thing is once you kind of write out your idea of what you think the sales process should be, one thing that early stage founders don't often do is they don't ask a colleague, like a co-founder, hey, this is my sales process. What do you think? they say, oh, we're just trying this out, but it's very rare to have somebody actually write out that process. And I'd say one thing that we've skipped over is this whole process starts with, who is your ideal customer?
Yes.
We're not just selling to random people that you meet on the street or that you bump into. You know, I worked for a VC one time who said that startups that sell to startups are like drunks that hold each other up at a party. So if you're only selling to your batchmates from 500 or YC or another program, then you're not getting enough true feedback from your market industry. You're seeing what other startups do, and they may, you know, they've got the same chances of success you do, right? It may work, it may not work, but you're not going to get that feedback right away. Where if instead you say, my ideal customer is different than the customer that I'll take, but my ideal customer is someone with 100 employees that has an office in the city that I can travel to when appropriate to do a pitch. Okay, now if I run those 3 filters and that's all I focus on for the first year, I'm going to get a lot of feedback that all calibrates very similar to itself, as opposed to I sold one company in New Jersey, one company in Guadalajara, I'm doing a deal down in Chile. Those companies are going to all make buying decisions very differently just in terms of how their processes work. You know, my friend that worked at Pepsi for Latin America, he said they did all their HR calls in English because the Spanish was so different across Latin America. As you know, as a guy who speaks 12 words of Spanish, I was like, dude, I don't know the difference between "yo" and "show," but apparently there is. Who knew?
True.
This is also
Guys,
true in buying process.
The third question I think is very relevant because this sounds very focused on B2B. How do you design a good sales process when you're thinking of B2C?
So honestly, I think most of it does carry over. The beauty of B2C is you have more people to talk to. Like B2B, it's tougher to get in touch with some of us, right? With B2C, you can do a lot of customer interviews. You can learn faster. You can adapt faster, right? But you need to know, and this is to Ryan's point, especially if it's B2C and there's a lot you can go after, narrowing down your focus early on is very important. But it's the same idea. Who's your ICP? Like, who's your ideal customer profile? What pain points are you solving, right? And communicating that properly, asking them to buy, and building in like a referral process, right? So it's very similar, right? But I think you actually have to be more focused because it's very easy to get spread out when you're B2C because you're like, I can sell to everybody. Like, look at all these people. So I think it's the same, but prospecting B2C is different. So, and it might be for some clarity, like if you're talking about a prospecting process, like very rarely do you see like, you know, a ton of cold calls and a ton of emails and a ton of social touches going B2C. That's normally more on the B2B side. More often not, B2C is heavy on inbound, which is the other bullet point there, than like handling the leads properly, scheduling those calls, running those demos, and working that process.
We had a question show up. How do I can be sure that my price is right without losing my current clients? This applies to B2B and B2C. So Israel, I'm not sure what type of company that you're running, but it can be scary to ask for more. You know, Jason Limkin at SaaStr will just say, hey, after you sell your first client, double the price. I think that's a pretty scary kind of cowboy approach. Although I love a lot of Jason's advice, I don't think that it's just double it and see what happens. I think there's a few ways that you can determine a pretty close price range, and that's by understanding the value. Remember the story I told about buying HubSpot versus Salesforce? When you know the other tools that they own, that tells you a little bit about what they'll buy. Another way to determine that is to get a sense of what they pay a full-time employee that does something similar to what your product's going to do. Mm-hmm. Now, not all products are ML that are going to, kill the workforce. But you might have something that makes, like we had a chat in the chat, somebody was talking about design software for an ad agent. An ad agency, maybe they pay their junior buyer $60,000 a year, let's say. And you build a tool that makes that person 10% better. So you just told me the value of that tool is $6,000. If you're selling it for $60 and I get $6,000 in return because you made my junior buyer more effective, that's a win. How do you think about pricing, Kevin, with Patient Pop? Like You're selling to a doctor who uses the tool in their practice, right?
Yes.
Are they thinking about ROI or what? How do you guys talk about that? Do you mind me asking?
So no, let's do it, right? So yes, we talk ROI, right? Of like, okay, if we can get you more patients, what is that worth for you? We also do what you talk about, like, what are you already spending on all of these things, right? And so you look at if you're replacing multiple tools, which is often the case sometimes too, is you're replacing 3 tools. So what are all of those 3 tools adding up to? Can you come in 30% less? Like I see this happen often, right? Where it's like this tool is replacing 5 tools and you're charging $50 for it. They're already spending $700 on all the tools. So you could come in at $400 and people are still going to be happy with it, right? So see if you're replacing things. But a small test you can run here, if less than 10% of people complain about your price is too low. Like if you're asking people to buy and less than 10% of people are going, oh my God, that's way too much, you can keep inching it up until you start to see 20, 30% of people going like, honestly, I love it, but I can't justify it. That's when you know you've hit your ceiling. So pay attention. If like there are products I've bought where they probably could have charged me 2-3 times more. They say, hey, this is what it costs. And I go, well, I'm a sales guy. So of course I go, ooh, really? And then they say, well, we can discount it. And I go, cool. I probably would have paid 3 times more for it, right? So pay attention to your closed lost reasons or the calls. If people aren't complaining, you're charging too low.
Yeah,
guys, into this same topic, I've seen that founders are scared about changing or probably testing different pricing, and I've seen some founders going to a different price model where it's twice the price that it was before. But sometimes I think they're scared of doing it because they think people will come back and complain and say like, I've seen that it was half the price before. How many times have you seen potential customers complaining about the old pricing?
Yeah. Can I give a short little like thing you could do to test this out? So most startup founders know other people who are also startup founders. All right. So think about somebody who sells something that's pretty similar, but not competitive, right? So maybe you both sell into companies that have 1,000 employees, let's say. Now, go and pitch to each other so you've got a chance to practice. We tell sales reps to practice their calls with each other all the time. Why aren't founders calling other founders and practicing their sales call and say, hey, you know, like if I know a founder whose last job was a manager at GE, let me go pretend I'm selling to GE and say, hey, put yourself in your old role. Let me try to sell. Now, on this piece around pricing, part of prospecting is understanding your customer. One way to understand the customer most people overlook is the jobs that are posted on their website. So if I'm selling a company, let's say I'm selling a 100-person company that's based in Mexico City, I look them up and I see they've got 10 jobs that are on their job board, their website that says, hey, here's who we're hiring. And one of them is a VP. Let's say it's a VP of cybersecurity. Well, the average VP of cybersecurity, I don't know what that is in Mexico, but let's say it's a 50K job or 100K job, whatever that number is. It doesn't really matter what the number is. What matters is you mark that and say, they're about to spend a lot of money, run a really fancy process to get a senior leader in who works for the CEO, which means there's a big gap. They've got 5 other VPs, 20% gap is this VP role. That means it's really strategic for them, right? That's a really strategic hire. And so if I'm going to go practice my sales call, I just tell my friend, I was like, hey, this is a strategic hire for you. I'm selling cyber software. I want to try to pitch it as something that when you hire your VP, you also bring on our tool or introduce us because that new VP is going to want to look at this at the same time. And now you're a package deal to a $500,000 project that $100,000 is buying the VP, $100,000 is buying your software, $300,000 is buying the team. Again, the numbers don't really matter. These are random numbers I chose. It's all relative to what market you're selling and what value you create. But you do need to know what those benchmarks are because that will tell you how big of a problem they have.
I would say one thing we actually haven't touched on that would solve a lot of, well, not solve, but give you insight on a lot of this is creating it's called a CAB, C-A-B, a customer advisory board. So you've got your other board that gave you the money, but then we never build a board of our customers. So you build a customer advisory board. This is where you can run your messaging by, run your marketing by them, run your process by them, run your pricing by them, right? And so you can get a feel, right? Like when I spoke to a lot of doctors when I started at Patient Pop, I heard from quite a few of them like, yeah, like, no, the price is great. Okay, now I know. Like if the price is great, I already know that we've increased prices twice since I've been there in 2 years and seen no reduction in sales on sales conversion rates. But form a customer advisory board so that you can ask your customers these questions, not just yourself or people in your company.
There's a great article about how to do that at First Round Capital's blog, and I threw it in the chat. It's by Pete Gazanji, who's a good friend and also somebody who posts a lot about early stage sales leadership. His book is about the founder sales process, also very worthy read as you think this through from the early stages, but also worthy for in the later stage. If you're a B2B sales rep, you should be thinking about your own book of business as its own entity. And you can have a customer advisory board for your enterprise team, let's say, as you get bigger and more focused, or a particular market. For LATAM, it might be different. If you're selling, let's say Amex's LATAM team and they're in Mexico, right? You go and you put a customer advisory board together for one group. That's okay too.
Guys, we have to jump to the last topic. But before we do that, I think this is related with the same topic. We increased our pricing 3 times the last 3 months and our conversion rates stayed the same. Do I have to keep increasing price until conversion rates start moving down, or do I need to look at something else?
I mean, that's just going to depend on your margins and your cost of acquisition. Like if you can find a sweet spot that works for your business and you can undercut the entire market and that works for you and your business, like you don't have to, like, and so, I know we're saying pricing and you can raise it, but you do need to know your business. If it only costs you $300 to acquire a customer and you're getting people to spend $2,000 on you and your conversion rates are still good, like that's okay. Like your margins are so great. And if that 2,000 is undercutting the whole market, that's actually a beautiful situation to be in. You now have a strong go-to-market process that no one else can touch. So I can't remember who said it. It was I think this was Ryan Dice. Don't quote me. Said whoever can spend the most to acquire a customer wins.
Mm-hmm.
Whoever can spend the most to acquire a customer wins. So if you have great margins, it means you can spend more to acquire somebody, right? So if your conversion rates are staying good and you have good margins, either you spend more to go get more of them, or you just keep a really great conversion rate as long as your margins are in place. That would be my advice there.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So let's jump
go ahead.
Let's jump into the next topic. And Danny, please help us with that. Yeah. So topic number 4 is going to be customer insights. How to obtain customer insights. And it will also relate to one of Salvador's question. A lot of what you described sounds like jobs to be done. How can I train my sales rep to be good at it? So how do you obtain customer insights, guys?
Asking.
Yeah.
You just got to ask, dude. Yeah. You got to ask. Mm-hmm. You can give a better answer than that, Katie, but you just got to ask.
Well, I'll give a better answer. Ask twice. Like, and I mean, like, it's laughable, but I actually mean it. Like, so often we ask one time and we don't hear back, so we never reach out again. Like, ask twice. One of the questions earlier on was how to build a commission plan. If you really need something done, you build it into the commission plan. Hey, you close a deal and you earn this much, but if you close a deal and you get a testimonial, or you close a deal and you get them into the customer advisory board, it's worth more, right? So you can build it into your sales process, right? I had, not on my current team, 2 teams ago, it was built in. You actually couldn't log the deal if you didn't actually ask them like what their biggest problem was right now. Like you couldn't log the deal. Like it was that built into our process. So like it's things like that where you have to ask. You can build the advisory board, but here's one that we haven't talked about is you need to observe. So what Job said it, right? Like, you know, if you just ask them what they want, like no one ever would have been like, yo, like I want a phone that does everything, because it was so far out from us even anticipating it. Observe what people do. If you watched people then fumble with this phone, right? And then check their pager and then have to open up their laptop to check their email. If you observe, you can see what they actually need. So as early stage founders, just please be careful of letting the customer tell you what to build. Observe how they use your tool, and you'll learn so much. If you can watch, I did this at Service Titan where I was prior to Patient Pop. I went out into the field and I watched them use the software. And it was actually mind-blowing to me, 1, how little of the software they used, but then 2, what parts they did use. Well, then I amplified my sales process to talk about those things. And then went back to CS and product and said, hey guys, do you know they don't even use this thing? Like, they don't even
I'll bet they love hearing that.
Oh no, they did not. Well, what was interesting, so I knew it. I said it to CS and they said, yeah, we know that. I went to product and they said, are you serious? I said, yes. Like, have you as a product or as a founder actually watched people use your tool? You will learn so much insights from observation.
Okay, so let me, I love
Guys,
where we're at.
There's a good question around, okay, they are taking the advice.
I got to lay out this thing real
Go.
quick. Hold that question. Most of the time when I listen to founders do sales calls, or when I hear about their sales scripts that they're building, they are asking yes or no questions, or they're open-ended questions. So if you go do the activity that Kevin suggested, where you go and you watch somebody use the product, usually they say, so what are you thinking? What are you doing? How do you buy this? That's an open-ended question. I'm going to give you 2 more questions that don't fit that pattern. Most founders forget to do this, but ask on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is X? Right. So let's say I'm selling a system like a sales tool, and I go to that VP of sales. I'm selling to Kevin. And so if I ask Kevin right now, hey Kevin, having accurate log deals in your Salesforce, how important is that from a scale of 1 to 10? Give me an answer.
That's a 9 for sure. If it's not accurate, I don't know where I'm at.
Okay. All right. So if it's not accurate, you don't know where it's at. So it's a 9. What would have to change to make that more important? What would make that a 10?
Would make that a 10. I guess if people started to churn, or I was missing target because I thought I was at one revenue and it actually wasn't there.
So think about the insight we just got from somebody who buys software all the time. Is that 10% of this last delta to make this the most important thing for him is going to change, right? So that's a scale of 1 to 10 question. Another question is asking someone to force rank. What's more important, speed or accuracy, right? Good. So Kevin says, oh, well, I want speed of getting deals done. I don't care if it's not accurate. That's fine. If I say, hey, what about your CEO? Do they like speed too, or are they accuracy? The answer is like, well, there's accuracy. Well, okay, so I just got a VP and a CEO conflict out as a customer insight. One said they care more about speed. One said they care more about accuracy. And now if I've got the guts, I'm going to ask the really hard question. What would have to change to align you both? Why don't you agree? How does the rest of the team feel? All of these are insight questions that are driven by just asking a better first question.
True.
Sorry, Renee, I cut you off.
No worries.
But I was just, I didn't want to forget to share that technique, because it's one of my favorite things to do is asking questions.
That was good. What you shared was probably better than what I was about to share. So
no, bring it to.
I was going to bring a question from the chat. Founders are taking the advice, ask and ask twice. But Eduardo is asking, how do you ask? Email, phone, other? What if customers don't answer? What are good best practices for this?
So the first best practice is getting ahead of it. Kind of what we talked about. These are little things that you can build into a contract that generally people will have no problem with. Hey, part of working with us is we actually put it in the agreement that we touch base every 90 days. Like, now you flipped it and made it sound like it was a good thing, right? Every 6 months, we touch base with all of our customers to check in on product utilization, bug fix it. Like, so you build it in before they even bought. That's the first place, right? But then the second one, very similar to sales. We say it a lot in the States, right? What's in it for me, right? What's in it for me? You need to give them a reason, right? So if you're just sending them these templated Survey Monkey emails, hey, we'd love to get your opinion. Please fill out our quarterly survey. Right? They're like, why? What's in that for me? Right? And so you need to make sure that your messaging tells them why. Why does it benefit them to talk to you? Why does it benefit them to fill out this survey? Why does it benefit them to do it? Oftentimes we can be too self-focused, right? Help us make our product better. Well, that's so bland versus, hey, we noticed you haven't logged in 45 days. That must mean it's not as easy to use as we thought it was. And we'd love to follow up and see if we could find a way to make this easier for you. Do you have 25 minutes for us next Friday? Right? You got to give them a reason to engage with you. That's the other big part.
Yeah, when you give them those reasons, hopefully it doesn't feel so transactional. It's like, hey, give me 5 minutes, I'll give you a gift card of $5.
Yes.
We had somebody comment about referrals and said the referral system might look like bribery. Give me a referral, I'll give you a $100 bill. Yeah, that does look like bribery. I can see that being a real challenge. But give me a referral because it's the right thing to do. Give me a referral so I'll feature on the website. I'll invite you to the customer advisory dinner. It all depends on where that line is for you, right? And you were going to ask for that. And one thing that I think is a great sales technique that also transfers over to success or even managing people is using language that trains your customer. When I am on my first call with a customer and I'm telling them what to expect out of engaging with us, and I say, I'm going to share with you a demo. Typically, we get into the back end demo when your IT person joins us on the next call. Let me tell you what to expect from our sales process. We're going to do 3 calls over the next 2 or 3 weeks. You and I are going to make sure it's compatible for the user on your team. And then potentially, we want to make sure the pricing is right. So you bring your director of procurement or CFO or whoever you're going to bring. And then I also want to deep dive back in. So typically, we have your IT person and your CFO on that 3rd call. Right now, I'm making stuff up here, but I want to illustrate when you use the language typically or usually, you're training that buyer as to what to expect from your sales process. Typically, we check in 90 days. But if you want to do your customer check-in earlier, happy to schedule that at 60. Now there's this built-in contract that we're going to talk about. Are you using the product? Just like Kevin suggested. Right?
Guys, Alberto is asking, it is difficult to get a customer to give feedback in a busy world. How insistent should we be before crossing the line?
Well, there's a customer expectation thing that happens from the very beginning. You're setting expectations when you reach out to somebody. If you cold call them transactionally and ask them for a credit card and you say, hey, now you bought my thing, and it's really transactional, that person doesn't really want to deal with you again unless you're giving them good reason to. You're always going to be in a transactional relationship. If Alberto, if you're saying, hey, I know it's difficult to get them on after they've been a customer, well, let's change the conversation with your new customers. I expect feedback every 90 days so I can build that thing you need, right? Maybe there's a gate in your product of, we're going to beta test new features, but part of that is you committing to giving us feedback. That's just one idea on how to do it.
I think one rule of thumb that can make it very easy, just reverse it for 1 second and feel like, when would I say this is too far? Like if I were a customer and someone was coming after me and they reached out to me 37 times, would I be annoyed? Probably would be annoyed. So I'm not going to build my team out to do it, right? Like, just remember, B2P, you're dealing with people. We have some built-in kind of feelers of like, all right, where is too far, too far? But I will say this, it's normally a little bit farther than you think, all right? And you know who trained us on this? I'm so glad he used the word trained. That's such a good word. Amazon has trained us to not get so bothered by outreach, okay? When you buy something, what happens? Immediately get an email. You just bought this. And then when it's getting ready to ship, you get an email. And then when it ships, you got an email. It's almost there. You got an email. It's arrived. You got an email. What'd you think? Got an email. You bought this. Do you want to buy this too? Got an email. You didn't buy. New sale. Got an email. So people actually don't get as bothered with a lot of outreach anymore because we've been trained that it's okay as long as there's a reason for it. So I would say you can be smart, but it's generally you can go a little bit further than you think you can.
True.
Mm-hmm.
How do you improve your customer feedback loop in order to have a better product and go to market? And I will add something else here where sometimes I hear that the sales team or whoever is running the customer feedback loop it's hard for them to translate this for the actual product owner and the rest of the team. So how do you improve the feedback loop and how do you actually make your team buy into it?
It's tricky. This actually comes back to, I think, what your company goal is. What are you building products for? Are you building products to improve new sales? Are you building products to improve retention? Are you building product to improve LTV? Right? Like, because you can't do it all at once. And so I think you're going to need to prioritize. And by making that choice, that tells you who should own a lot of those communications in my eyes. If sales are looking good, but churn is a problem, then you need to be talking to CS a little bit more to figure out, like, well, why are people churning out? If retention is great, but sales are low, and it's like, well, why are people not buying, right? Like, if they're not expanding, then you're again talking to CS. So I think it depends a little bit on company goals. I'd be very curious to hear Ryan's point of view on this because he's worked with a lot of different kind of startups through these different sizes. I'm not sure how they've done it in those ones.
I think, what you've said is a great kind of foundation, and just thinking about what the relationship should be. I mean, we get caught up and we forget to kind of run the common sense filter. Like your question about the outreach is like, how far is too far? When would you be annoyed? Right? We'll ask that question a little more broad. This is when I would be annoyed, and then go ask a few of your friends. And if they say different things, well, now you just take the average of that and say, okay, we're going to do an experiment. We do experiments on the product side all the time. We got to do an experiment on this side, right? And so if it's around like getting feedback, if the goal is to change the world because we're going to do the best, online logistics portal or whatever you're building, if the goal is to change the world, ask your customer, how close are we to changing your world? And they say, oh, you're about a 1 out of 10. Okay, what do I have to do to be a 2? Well, you know what? If you manage carrier logistics for trucks and boats, that would double the impact. You'd go right to 3 or 4. Well, then I'm probably going to have a hard conversation with my product lead about why we should add that. But not before I say, if it doubles the value, does that also double what you'll pay? Now, that sounds like a really trick kind of like, salesy kind of transactional question. But instead I say, hey, how much value is that? Does that displace hiring employees? If you had to hire a consultant to fix the same project, how much would you pay them? We're still talking about your projects. We're still talking about your problems. We're still talking about what you're going to do to solve that. But we're actually putting into a customer feedback kind of process. The other thing that I think is really crucial is I've seen a couple companies that have had to pivot. I think we've all seen that in startups where it's like, oh, they do this now. They start out doing this thing, they do this thing now. I worked at one, a couple of different companies I worked at had a big pivot. And sometimes in that pivot, the product team isn't necessarily passionate about the new market that you're building for. There needs to be an internal reset to make sure everybody is in love with the user and with the customer, and especially if the user is someone different than the buyer, right? Which is why I use that language differently. But we got to make sure we're building for that person because we love it. Kevin's talking about a company he likes called SalesLoft. And one thing that I've seen from the beginning of both SalesLoft and their main competitor Outreach is both of those CEOs have been in sales. They care about sales and they care about their user so much. There are a few other people who've tried to compete with him where the teams pivoted into it because they thought sales would be a great place to do business. And honestly, the market can tell, right? Like the market can tell that you're not passionate about salespeople. So why are you building software for us? The same is probably true in your industry too. If you're not passionate about, the thing that you're building or the market that you're building it for, really try to figure out how to get people on board who are passionate about that, because that passion is going to come through your product.
Cool. Guys, we have a few minutes left, and I would like to go over a couple of questions that we have on the chat. So,
cool. Rapid fire.
Herbert is asking, any advice to establish an emotional over a transactional relationship with a customer?
You want to do that one, Katie?
Yeah. So, okay. Honestly, I'll keep bringing up the relationship example. What is the emotion you want them to feel? You got to start with what is the emotion you want them to feel, and then act accordingly, right? If you want them to feel happy, do things that surprise them and make them happy. If you want them to feel secure, right? Like, what are things that you can add security into, like the deal? If you want them to feel excited, what's some novelty you can provide them, right? So first is defining what emotion you're actually trying to get them to feel, and then you just act accordingly. I think that's the best way I can put it in a short, compact way.
Yeah. I want to go back to thinking about trust, right? Emotional connection only happens when you trust somebody. And one of the resources that I read, has been talked about since early days of my career, but when I got and really dug into this book called Trusted Advisor, David Meister and his team talk about what actually constitutes trust. And especially when you think about enterprise sales, he basically lays out an equation that trust can only happen when there's credibility, reliability, and intimacy in an environment with low self-orientation. So think about your sales rep. The last thing you bought, if the sales rep is only in it for their own commission, you can feel that, right? Like for me, it's buying a car. I'm always worried the car dealer is just only out their own commission, they're going to lie to me. But when that car dealer comes and they're really credible because they know the whole industry and they can compare my car to the other ones on the market, they're reliable because they come to the meeting on time. They create a sense of safety or intimacy by talking about other people who have driven that same car, other clients they have, problems they have in their own life that they bought a similar car to solve, or their brother has the same challenge with getting all the kids in the back, and they really create that environment. And so Meister's equation, I wrote it out for you. Let me see if I can get this to focus. Trust equals credibility, reliability, and intimacy over self-orientation. So think about that a little bit when you're thinking how do I create a real emotional connection? That's never going to happen if they don't trust you. And trust is really bringing together some of those things. So it's not just you're the most credible because you know the market or you've got a PhD on the topic. You also have to be reliable, and you also have to create a sense of safety and intimacy with somebody telling you about their problem. If I'm trying to fix an IT problem or a cybersecurity problem, and I tell you about my vulnerability from my last pen test, and you laugh in my face, I will never trust you. You're only out for your commission. You're laughing at me saying, oh, you should have bought our product. If you had Cisco, we'd fire you. No, that's not making me feel safe and want to trust you. I'm not going to emotionally connect with you. That was a bit of a rant, wasn't it? Sorry.
A little bit.
No, it was good. We will all remember that posted on the camera. We have time for one more question, and I know there's so many there. So, Ryan, why don't you choose the next and last question?
Okay.
And for everyone that is not getting their question answered, I promise that we will be doing more of these events so we can answer your questions.
Well, I'd say one thing. There's a question that comes to mind while Kevin looks for his, because I'll bet you're going to call on him next. We had a couple of questions that say, can we talk more about B2C, the business, like our startup selling to a consumer? And I want to offer two things. One, I think it was Jimmy who asked about pricing for his online degree certificate. I would say that, when you start out and you're thinking about pricing for a B2C product, understand a little bit about what that consumer is going to do with the product and what it means for their life. In consumer, it's often that you're going to price shop and compare. And as you price shop, you're also determining, is this that valuable? Sometimes people go to professional schools because they think a guaranteed interview is going to be worth a job that's going to pay me X amount of money when I graduate. And that's the way they think through it, especially if they're pitching for a parent to go and give them money for school. Well, if I give you money, will you get a job and get out of my house? Okay, cool. That's some ROI. This all goes back to the stuff that we're saying about B2B. In other environments, it's going to be looking at the other stuff in the market and saying, is this really delivering its promise for the cost? Whether you want to undercut that or be the premium service, there's a lot of people who write about pricing strategy. The other thing I'd say is if you're somebody in B2C and you're watching this recording or you've listened in tonight and you're thinking, I don't know if this really applies to me, use some of these sales strategies to think about how you go and create relationships with channel partners, right? Maybe you're going to be distributed by Amazon or Mercado Libre, and you need to work with the BD person there to make sure your products get into their store. Well, that's a sales process. In fintech, you might need a banking partner, and there in Latin America, especially, banks can be rough to deal with because of the economics are just very different than they are for me. I'm not going to be your best advisor on that, but you are going to have to think about a sales process essentially of how do I prospect the right partner? How do I know what they're interested in? How do I talk to them? And so I guess what I'm saying is B2B sales is everywhere, just like life is a negotiation, and so negotiations everywhere. B2B sales process is everywhere too. And the more you learn about it, the more you think about it. I think that's going to apply even when you're B2C or thinking about raising a round of capital or hiring an employee. I think some of these things will ring true.
Awesome. Guys, we are on time, 7:30 p.m. as we promised, and I understand that Kevin needs to run to another meeting. So it's time to finish this event. Sorry for everyone that didn't get their question answered. I promise, as I mentioned before, we will keep doing these events. Kevin, Ryan, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you so much for joining us for our first live session of Growth Nights, and I hope to see you soon. Hopefully here in Mexico City, if not in another call like this. For everyone that joined and for everyone that is still listening tonight, thank you so much for joining us, and hopefully you can join us for our next session.